The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Pastor Mai, good afternoon. We're on Mannin Line today, through to one open line, so the floor's yours. Whatever you want to talk about, by all means, get in touch, text, email and call and WhatsApp. I got a note in from Marie, says Andy, the commissioners have apologised, but with no explanation, which they should do, as people on social media jump to the conclusion that they blame the Lieutenant Governor, which apparently is incorrect. So Ramsey Town Commissioners should explain, says Marie. This is the story about Ramsey Town Commissioners who started Remembrance Sunday rather early. The 2-minute silence, which should have been at 11 a.m, started at 10 to 11. Lots of people calling it disrespectful. Government House has confirmed to Max Radio the Lieutenant Governor arrived at the requested time for the service in Ramsey and stayed for the duration of the event, including tea and a chat afterwards. The Lieutenant Governor had no other commitments other than the National Service of Remembrance at 3 o'clock at St John's. Commissioners have apologised. They said they'd like to apologise to everybody who attended. They're sorry for any offence it may have caused for starting the silence 10 minutes early. So any thoughts on this? And also the idea of exploitation, apparently it's a very live issue on the Isle of Man. And the people, this week is Safeguarding Week. The Isle of Man Safeguarding Board have issued a message to say that people need to be very focused on picking up the signs of somebody who is basically at risk. This year's theme is all age exploitation and aims to highlight the harms that young people and vulnerable adults face. This idea of, we'll talk more about this later on, but it's a real live issue, particularly where young people are concerned, and as Leslie Walker will mention, vulnerable older people, and this idea of coercion, which may start off being very friendly, but then turns into something completely different. Anyway, Peter's first with us today. Hi, Peter.
Oh, hello, Andy. I'm ever so sorry. It's going to be the subject that I've got to come back to.
Oh, no, by all means. No, by all means. It's no. The floor's yours.
Well, I didn't hear the debate yesterday because I was out taking a church service. However, I've got one or 2 points I would just like to make. First of all, number one, I am very disappointed that Manx Radio took so long to get a debate about the bill. It's a bit late when you get to LegCo. They do have powers to reject bills, but where the real power lies in the keys. Now, I asked more than once the bill was published, I asked more than once of Manx Radio, could we have a debate as it was going through the keys? And I never got any replies. So it was really, to my mind, to debate it when it's reached LegCo is a missed opportunity. I was in on the debate that they had. We had a very, very intelligent and respectful debate with all parties before the bill was published. The problem was that we could only talk in general terms. When we got the fine detail, to me, that was when we should have had another debate on what was actually being proposed, and that never took place until yesterday. So first of all, to register my great disappointment that an opportunity was missed at the time when it would have been the most effective. The second thing is to say, I see in today's paper that 3,400 medical staff, doctors and other medical professionals, have written to Keir Starmer to express their opposition to what's being proposed in Britain, and they've stated that the health service is already broken and would not be able to cope. And they pointed out a number of very important points, not least that it changes the legal duty of care for the safety and well-being of patients, which, of course, would happen if they were to take on board this bill. So you probably already know that Wales debated the possibility of introducing one and rejected it. And so it's it's a matter of great concern that some of the details, so the Isle of Man looks rather likely to be out on a limb on this one, and that's got ramifications for itself. And what's even more of a ramification is that there are some very serious defects in that bill that went through the Keys, not least at the time of the point of death, which I pointed out before, and they haven't been remedied. Whether they will be in Legco, I know not, but there we are. That's the situation that we find ourselves in.
And what's your opinion, Peter, as to, are you totally against the idea of this legislation? Would you like any changes to it? But if you were in a perfect world, what would you actually like?
I'd like the legislation to be thrown out because they have no power to introduce it in the first place, as I pointed out. They've got no constitutional power to introduce it. They have a duty to enable the Crown to maintain its coronation oath. They swear allegiance to the Crown. Now, the Crown has, at Parliament's insistence, and the Crown didn't invent it, the King cannot become king unless he swears, in effect, the parliamentary oath to maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel. Now, if you put the King in that position, you cannot pass legislation having made it impossible to be the king unless you swear that oath, and then to produce bills that actually break the oath. And I shall be writing, of course, to the appropriate sources in due course to point this out. So right from the very outset, it's flawed. We do remember also, and I believe that a figure was quoted of supposedly the number of people who favour this bill, but I didn't hear the broadcast, so I can't quote it myself. We had a consultation. Now, I don't think I'm being unfair to say that the consultation wasn't exactly framed in a neutral fashion of arguments for and arguments against. So it was really framed in favour of the bill. And yet, they lost. And yet, they introduced the bill having lost the consultation. But sadly, that is what seems to happen in the Isle of Man. We had a consultation, for example, on Sunday racing. They lost. They got 60% against it, and so what did they do? They went ahead with Sunday racing. And so I think that's a most important point. They lost the consultation. They have adopted the suicide prevention strategy. They are therefore going to be spending public money in two opposite directions at a time when we have got problems with the finances, and they put themselves in breach of their oath of allegiance to the Crown, who's got a duty to refuse the royal assent to this bill, but of course is then caught in a constitutional hard place, because if he does that, that would be the end of the monarchy. Now, that's the sort of situation they're creating, and I think they need to understand that.
So why do you think this was brought forward as a private member's bill? What's the motivation behind it?
Well, I don't know what the motivation was, except that it would come as a private member's bill, because traditionally this sort of legislation very rarely, if ever, becomes part of government legislation, because they leave it to the conscience of the various elected representatives. So they're not bound by the collective responsibility rule, you see. I don't know why it was introduced. I do know that, as I've said so many times before, we needed a proper debate, an informed debate, when it was going through the keys, which I would have been very glad to have supplied, about exactly the fine detail of what they were proposing. And that debate never took place, and I do believe that that was a very unfortunate error, and I have to be quite blunt, on Manx Radio's part. They would have done a great service to this nation if they had broadcast a full debate with all the parties involved on the bill when it was going through the keys. They've left it too late, and I'm very disappointed.
So, just going back to the fact it is a private member's bill, why do you think there would there have been no traction then if this had been government legislation brought forward?
I don't quite understand what you mean.
Well,
could you tell me?
As you say, I asked you why it came forward as a private member's bill rather than being sort of government policy, as it were. So it's been brought in as a private member's bill.
Yeah.
And you said that's because it couldn't form part of government policy.
Well, they don't. It's a moral issue. It's a spiritual issue. It's an ethical issue. And traditionally, we could go back through legislation that's happened before, governments fight shy of introducing that sort of legislation. They leave it to a private member if the private member is so inclined, as obviously in both legislatures there are private members who want to introduce that. And then they leave it open to the legislature, to the members of the legislature, to vote as they will. The problem is with that one, especially on this bill, as I've said, and I shall go on saying, is that they have a constitutional problem, which I did point out in the original debate that we had before the bill was published, that they are constitutionally unable even to introduce that legislation because of the Coronation Oath Act. The first thing they've got to do is to discover whether there is an appetite in Parliament, in the British Parliament, to repeal the Coronation Oath Act and to replace it with something else. That would be the first thing they've got to do before they even introduce it. And they've not done that. They've really put the cart before the horse here. And so unless and until they do that, this sort of legislation is constitutionally wrong. And it makes the whole oath of allegiance to the Crown really just a formality. And it shouldn't be. It should have a serious aspect to it. They should help the Crown. They shouldn't put the King in that sort of position where he has to give the royal assent to a bill which is obviously and incontrovertibly against his oath to maintain the laws of God. Because this bill is against the laws of God.
Appreciate it, Peter.
Yes,
and by the way, don't ever apologise for coming on Mannin Line. The programme is
right.
for everybody.
I've got something else, actually, but I can't come on yet. There's just a slight correction I want to make to something I said last week. Someone's pointed out a bit of very interesting information, but I want to get it confirmed before I come back to you.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Well, this is Peter Greenhill, who was on Perspective yesterday with Phil Gorn. Could there be changes, basically, to the assisted dying bill? The proposals recently took their first step in the Legislative Council, with members agreeing to progress the clauses stage with an evidence stage to consider new legislation being discussed in the UK. Peter Greenhill, MLC, is the MLC responsible for moving the bill. And he told Phil Gorn he believes there may need to be some minor amendments to the 5-year residency requirement following his own experience for being treated with a brain tumour.
My own personal feeling on that is it depends actually when that terminal diagnosis takes place. In my particular case, with the brain tumour, I'd only been on island for 4 years. And had I absolutely needed that operation and that came up with it, they could not operate. Then, under the way the bill is actually set out at the moment, I wouldn't have been able to take advantage of assisted dying. So I think there may well be potential for a slight adjustment to what we have in the bill at the moment, just to take into account those people who are given that diagnosis of terminal illness after they've been living on the island. I think that's worth looking at. But at the moment, that protection is certainly in there.
Paul Crane, in his comments, has suggested that actually the choice of the individual shouldn't effectively step in the way or interfere with the choice of the collective, the community. Is that a fair argument?
I never have a problem with, and Paul, I've said this to Paul afterwards, that I'm very pleased that he is making his own comments there, and that's part of everything that we should hear. But there are 7 of us in that debate that are in favour of the principles of this bill and taking it forward. I really think that this is something in our community that a very large number of people, I don't need to define whether that's 50% or 90% or whatever, there's a very large percentage of our people who really want to be able to make that choice. And I fully respect those people who don't want to make that choice, and they won't have to.
Any thoughts on this? That was Peter Greenhill, MLC. If you've got any thoughts on the matter, by all means do get in touch. Text 166 177, WhatsApp 166 177, email studio@maxradio.com, call 66 13 68. Well, somebody who tried unsuccessfully to bring forward a private members bill. I'm trying to think, was it 2005? Former MHK Quintin Gill is with us. Was it 2005, Quintin?
It was around then, Andy. I really, though, just wanted to respond to Peter Murcott's argument on a narrow scale. We have debated the principle, but it's about the competence that he's now claiming that nobody can pass any legislation unless if it somehow impacts on what his perception of the role of the monarch is. Certainly, when I was introducing the Private Members Bill, we had the Attorney General of the day who was very eloquent, and at no point did he mention anything in the manner that Peter is. And I think I would just test that argument by saying, if it was contrary to the Coronation Act, as Peter continues to claim and is alone in claiming, then how is it that a Private Members Bill is being allowed into the UK Parliament if it's so contrary to a basic premise? And then my final point to Peter is, when he talks about 3,500 medics, I don't know what the definition of medic is in the UK, saying they're opposed to the bill, which is entirely their right, and their professional integrity is not impacted by the passage of this type of legislation. But just having 3,500 people from any profession saying they disagree with something is not. It doesn't mean you've lost the argument, as he claims. A consultation is not a referendum, and he shouldn't mix the two up when it suits. Okay,
Quintin, you obviously felt strongly about this when you tried to bring it in as a private members bill. Would you mind sharing with the audience what was your motivation? What was the reason behind it?
Purely and simply to give people choice, individuals as autonomous individuals with capacity to give them choice over their life and their death. And you'll remember, Andy, in those days the government used to boast that the Isle of Man had the best quality of life and the best place to live in the world. And our feeling was, well, we should extend that to people's end-of-life choices as well. And if you don't want that, as Peter doesn't, then if whatever reasons he has, he's more than entitled. Anybody else is more than entitled to follow their reasoning, their beliefs. But I wanted everybody to have a similar choice, the same degree of choice in the opposite direction. And it was about compassion, pure and simple.
What was the mood like in Tynwald and in Keys when you were bringing this private members bill forward?
Well, we knew, John Remington and I knew that it wouldn't be successful. However, the purpose wasn't to get it passed. The purpose to get the subject for mature consideration onto the agenda. And it succeeded in that, as we are seeing now. I shared Peter Greenhill's views about that he's just been eloquently speaking about the current bill, and in all cases, it's better, need to be completely clear that as many safeguards and protective clauses are introduced at this stage. And I think that's Legislative Council doing their job.
OK. Quintin, we really appreciate you calling in with that. Thanks for calling.
Thank you, Andy.
Good to hear from you. Former MHK Quintin Gill, the politician who, well, it was 2005, I think, when he unsuccessfully tried to bring forward a private member's bill. He and John Rimington were involved in that to introduce the concept and, if approved, the practice of assisted dying on the Isle of Man. It is a big, big subject, and if it's something you want to weigh in on, some opinion you have, by all means, do get in touch. And here's Julian with us now. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Andy. Just listening to what Quintin said, he used the word choice. But if the palliative care and hospice are struggling for funding, and I'm taking that directly from Manx Radio's previous news things, you've got 3/4 of their funding has to come from voluntary donations, and they're constantly struggling. And they're always saying that they are threatening to foreshorten their services.
And do you think is it a question of either or? Then, if assisted dying it comes into the Isle of Man, do you think? I mean, is that going to threaten or in any way endanger the hospice?
But would you say? I mean, there's two sides to this argument as well, and another side of this. Would you say that the Manx Care is struggling to facilitate operations and see people and have all this, all the appointments on time? I'd say that's a problem, isn't it, at the moment? So what happens if a third of the doctors who've said they'll leave the service on the island, if that happens, what's that going to do to we're kind of on the edge at the moment. If a third of the doctors leave just because of getting in this assisted dying bill, what's going to happen?
Well, they may have that problem in the UK, well, certainly in England, if it's brought forward in England.
Yeah, but don't forget, Peter and myself are in reasonably good company because the UK Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, agrees with this. It's not like we're just saying this out of some crazy thing that, you can't see that we have to have this, it's a choice. When you've got palliative care is really, really down on its funding, how is that a choice? I'm sorry, Quintin, but how is it a choice? Maybe if, the hospice was completely on board and had all the facilities it ever needed for everything, and everyone had all the availability to get in there, and you could have 24/7 care at home as well, which you can't. People who bring people home from, if they don't want to go in the hospice, it can't be the same level of, it's like if you had a massive car accident. If it was a case of a doctor coming around for 1 or 2 hours a day to see how you're doing, or 24/7 rolling care and A&E, what would you choose? So, there's this point that, if we could offer endless amounts of doctors and nurses to look after people at home, if that's their choice, then, fair enough. But that is not the reality. So it's not a choice, is it?
Okay. But anyway, that wasn't why you called. Correct.
The German word Dunkelflaute is being used in energy circles these days. Dunkelflaute is the German word that translates to dark doldrums. The meteorological term is anticyclonic gloom, which, of course, we've had now for almost 2 weeks. And it's extended across the whole of Europe. And this has resulted in both the UK, Germany, and many other European countries are suddenly paying 9 times the price for their electrical production, as they have to either massively go with interconnectors between the European countries, and whoever's supplying the other end of those interconnectors are also in the same boat. They have to hastily ramp up what's left of the inefficiently run gas and coal power stations to maintain the base load.
And it's the French nuclear power as well.
Yeah, but nuclear doesn't ramp up and down. It's not something you can just turn up and down like a gas cooker. It's it's something that has to be maintained. You can't be pulling those rods in and out of the nuclear piles like whenever you like.
Yeah, point taken.
But I noticed on the International Energy Agency's website, which you can see at iea.org, there's an outlier country close to Europe, which is Turkey. Now, the International Energy Agency states that Turkey's production price is 72% less than the UK or Germany's normal electrical production price now. So Turkey's energy generation is derived from 2/3 coal, and the last third is made up primarily of natural gas and a smaller amount of hydroelectric. And the renewables are so tiny they barely move on the graph. Now, this results in the domestic unit price of electricity in Turkey currently being 4 pence per kilowatt hour.
4
which
pence?
Is 7 times less than ours. And there's been no variability in that price because they don't have the issue with almost no wind or solar for 11 days. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is another thing that's come to my attention just recently. I noticed the appointment of a company that's installing the Caervite wind farm at Erie Stane. The company is called Blue, without the E, so BLU 3. So a search on the internet for Blue BLU 3 Isle of Man will come straight up on the first search with a web page from where they are based in a house in Kent. Now, the web page says they have surveyed the 17 pinch point locations between Douglas and Erie Stane. I noticed they've only ever done electrical installations, concrete work and paving for computer cloud server installations and some ducting for a small wind farm in Dungeness. But they don't have any experience in actually installing wind turbines. So I'm just wondering, we haven't even completed the EIA yet they're calling the Isle of Man government their client. I'm just wondering why this is going down this road so quickly. I mean, it would be kind of nice to know if the wind farm even passes the environmental impact. And the other question is, how much has Blue 3 cost us? Because if Wardell Armstrong is going towards £3 million, what's it cost for Blue 3 to do drone surveys and, sort of working out all this other stuff?
I wonder if anybody from Blue 3's actually been to the island.
Well, I hear that there were vans knocking about doing some of these surveys. And when you look on their website, they've got an aerial view looking down on the sea terminal roundabout and having little lines drawn where they want to bring these massive blades either, through the top bit or through the south bit, whichever way around they're going to do it. And I just wonder, this whole, you look at Turkey using coal and gas, and they're 3/4 cheaper than we are at 4 pence a unit at the moment, according to the Turkish government's own website. And then you start looking more into, the likes of Ørsted, Equinor and Vattenfall, which are the three big operators that are doing most of the offshore wind farms for the UK, like Morgan & Morgan, Mona, and the more Mannin one that's likely to be off Mackle if they get their way. But it's interesting to note that, as I said the other day about the Isle of Man, like turning itself into one of them, these operators like Ørsted, they're expecting to sell a large portion of their shares in projects. And normally it's the over-optimistic investors who don't really appreciate the risks involved. And also, the associated financial investors, especially when you have, if you look at Equinor, Ørsted and Vattenfall, they are all part-owned by government. So they expect to be bailed out if the worst happens. And if it's likely that if gas prices will continue to fall, especially with the new administration going in January in America, if that happens, the only way that they're going to be able to make the renewables look good, it won't be the gas price. The only way that they're going to be able to make wind turbines look cheap as compared to fossil fuels, and they're still doing this, is carbon taxation. From what I've been reading, the cost that we're being told about gas generation, actually half of that price is the true cost. The other half is carbon taxes.
Wow.
So they're going to have to triple the they're going to have to increase the carbon tax by up to 10 times. And it's likely to mean triple our existing electrical charges. So if you're talking about 29p, Andy, I think we might be looking at somewhere between 75 and 90 in the not too distant future.
Well, can you imagine if anybody suggested doubling the unit cost of electricity on the Isle of Man? Do you really think that would fly on the island?
Well, this is the thing, you see. And now...
No, I'm answering you a genuine question. Do you think the public would stand the doubling of the cost of electricity?
Well, we have already. It was 17 before 2022. Nobody's really kicking up a fuss about 29p is a ridiculous amount of money to pay when it's only 7p to make it, according to the MUA.
Okay. All right. Appreciate it, Julian. We've got to crack on, but I appreciate your call today. Thanks for calling.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
Good to hear from you. Nick says, I think it's interesting that COP29 is being held in a country that produces over 843,000 barrels of oil a day and consumes 91,000 barrels of oil per day, says Nick the Skip. Let me see. It's not assisted dying is not assisted suicide. There's a difference between assisted dying, means people are going to die. Suicide means you can help people to change their mind and get them all the help that you need, says WhatsApper 744. Isn't royal assent just a formality anyway? The king doesn't have any real power, says WhatsApper 841. The king surely is just Lord of Man is just a puppet. Bravo, Quentin Gill, says Steve, the voice of reason in this matter. You can tie yourself up in legislative argument as long as you like, but the bottom line is there's no coherent argument given by anybody opposed to assisted dying as to why they should have any right to remove other people's choice to opt into assisted dying when they have the option to opt out. Thanks for that. I mentioned that it is Safeguarding Week this week. Exploitation on the Isle of Man is an absolutely live issue. That is, people at risk. At risk. Children and vulnerable adults at risk from other people. You need to be focused on picking up the signs. The message from Leslie Walker, who's the independent chair of the Isle of Man Safeguarding Board. This is Safeguarding Week. This year's theme is All Age Exploitation and aims to highlight the harms that young people and vulnerable adults face. Leslie says there's a whole range of warning signs that somebody is being targeted.
In 2021, we actually launched an exploitation strategy. We had a big conference, and that introduced some new ways of working that focused on safeguarding children and young people. And we developed a whole new toolkit to support staff in knowing how best to work with exploitation. And that was with all of the partner agencies round the table, taking a really sort of proactive approach. And then since then, we've been out to evaluate the impact of some of that work, to look at where we need to strengthen some of the practice and support practitioners who work daily out in the field with some very difficult situations. And then since then, we've been very keen to really get a focus on exploitation in terms of adults, and particularly vulnerable adults who would be at most risk from exploiters, which are, can be individuals or a group, often organised crime, so are deliberately targeting those that they may feel are vulnerable. So they're through either force, control, coercion, manipulation, or deceit, and far often, obviously, their financial advantage or power or control. And so, that can have a whole range of presentations. So particularly for adults, it can involve actually organised crime, individuals taking over a person's home for criminal purposes, which is known as cuckooing, for obvious reasons. They're coming in effectively to take over and use that person's address for illegal activities, whether it be storing, selling drugs, and a whole range of things.
There's still a perception on the Isle of Man that some of these bigger issues we don't necessarily have here. There's always that phrase, isn't there, that the Isle of Man's so safe. So does the board do work to try and almost like dispel that and educate the public more widely?
Yes, very much. And during this week, we have been running a number of poster campaigns to raise awareness of the issues. I can only stress it is an absolutely live issue on the island, and that people need to be very focused on picking up the signs.
Leslie Walker talking about this Safeguarding Week. If you want more information, you go to manxradio.com. There's a link through to the government page. Basically, there's a drop-in session for you to, as a part of the feature of Safeguarding Week. There's going to be a drop-in session later on this week. It's a very topical issue in that a couple of weeks ago, do you remember when the Chief Constable was on Manx Radio and he talked about the fact that the Isle of Man. He's been in the business, in the law enforcement business, over 30-odd years. Russ Foster said the Isle of Man, I'm paraphrasing him here, but the Isle of Man reminds him of rural Yorkshire 30 years ago. And rural Yorkshire now is a hotbed of organised crime. And the implication is that if we don't guard against organised crime will come to the Isle of Man. And let's face it, in some cases it is. The amount of people for being sent with long sentences now for drugs offences, for drug supply on the Isle of Man, the pushers and the big suppliers will tell you that there is organised crime on the Isle of Man, and it could manifest itself in the abuse and exploitation of children and vulnerable adults. It is a problem.
At Manning Medics, we offer a wide range of health checks and specialist private consultants, including respiratory, renal, general surgery and gastroenterology. We can even do home visits too. To find out about all we have to offer and to book, visit manningmedics.com. Manning Medics, quality healthcare you can trust. Manning Medics is a trading name of I'll Love Your Gut Limited.
Walk through the Christmas wonderland at Ramsey Garden Centre for a magical range of trees, decorations, unique gifts and much more, including the widest range of indoor and outdoor lights. Christmas at Ramsey Garden Centre, open 7 days a week.
Well, today I'm going to talk about the finest bathrooms in town. Hello, cheeky monkey.
I hope you're going to recommend Paysetter.
Of course.
Wow, it's where all the cool cats go.
Yes, smart cats like you choose Paysetter for a wide range of stylish designs and superb expert advice.
Squawk! Paysetter! Paysetter!
That's right, Polly. The magic starts when you visit Paysetter Tile and Bathroom Studio, Harris Terrace, Douglas, or search online for Paysetter Douglas.
Get ready for Black Friday at Comus Hotel and Golf Resort. On the 29th of November from 4 to 9 p.m, everyone's invited to take advantage of our Black Friday offers, only available in person at Comus, including an extra £50 when you buy a £200 voucher to spend on overnight stays, dining, golfing or spa treatments. T's and C's apply. Plus lots of other exclusive offers only available in person on the night. For details, visit comushotel.com. For perfect Christmas gifting opportunities, come to Comus Hotel and Golf Resort on the 29th November.
The debate that preceded the vote of no confidence into the Chief Minister raised a number of interesting points about the importance of the role. Some MHKs suggested that the policies of government would not change regardless of the person leading the Council of Ministers. Others felt that a change of Chief Minister was needed but seemed somewhat vague on why and indeed what a replacement might do differently. On agenda this week, former Douglas East MHK Chris Robertshaw considers the debate and explains what they should be talking about. That's agenda at 5:30 this evening on Manx Radio with me, Phil Gorn. Yes, more from Chairman Robertshaw's Little Green Book.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
17 minutes now before 1. After Mannin Line today, it's Monday, it's our 60th anniversary. Former Chief Minister, you're going to love this, former Chief Minister Donald Gelling. Donald Gelling will be on Mannin Line just after we finished speaking to David Collister about his career before politics. What a Chief Minister Donald Gelling was, and he's on after Mannin Line today. Also, a quick word about cannabis cultivation. Plans have been approved for a cannabis cultivation facility, the first of its kind on the Isle of Man. Grow Labs Organic is to build its headquarters and production site on the Ronaldsway Business Park. Didn't that used to be the industrial estate? Anyway, the Ronaldsway Business Park, the company is the first to be offered a conditional medicinal licence for export on the Isle of Man since regulations were approved 3 years ago in 2021. At the meeting of the Planning Committee this morning, plans were approved unanimously. The company told Manx Radio it hopes to have the facility up and running within a year. Grow Lab Organics, headquarters and production site for medicinal cannabis at Ronaldsway Business Park. Andrew's with us now. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andy. Good day to you and listeners. Just wanted to follow up, please, quickly on your comments, previous commentary, the Chief Constable and security. And I did hear yesterday from a well-informed person that there was an outburst, I'll put it like that, at the Onken Remembrance Service in respect of support for Palestine. I just wondered if you heard that.
I've not heard anything about that. Is that hearsay, or was it reported on social media?
I believe let's say it's hearsay.
Right,
from
okay.
The person I was talking to is very well respected.
Okay, no. If anybody's got any more information about that, we'd like to hear.
But it then made me think, because I was in attendance yesterday at St John's, where there was the Lieutenant Governor and other senior politicians, and obviously lots of other representatives. And what I thought was noticeable was that there was no armed police presence in an open setting, whereby it would be like a soft target.
And would you expect armed police there?
Well, they attended the Cannabis for a conference in a building.
Yeah.
Which presumably would be a more secure location, and didn't actually have the Lieutenant Governor in attendance. So it just makes me come back to why the armed police were at the Cannabis, and in my opinion, it's even though it's been said there was an assessed threat, but nobody would say what it was, then it's in my opinion, it's just PR that they came to show their toys because Jane Poole Wilson, Justice, was there giving her outlines of what she expected in respect of security for the Isle of Man with ID.
Yeah, you say, I mean, it's always that they assess, what they call it, the threat level, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, when you've got the Lieutenant Governor and the Chief Constable himself at a setting with the Justice Minister and other senior politicians, etc., outdoors, there was no perimeter security at all. And it just, I don't know what how they do that, but in my thought, if there was an outburst at Onken, then surely there could have been an even bigger outburst, demonstration or something at St John's.
Interesting.
Anyway, I'll leave that with you.
I appreciate that, Andrew. Thanks for calling today.
Thanking you. Cheers now.
Good to hear from you. I mentioned that there's a programme of events this week. It's the Isle of Man Safeguarding Week. The one today finished at 12 o'clock. There's nothing tomorrow, but there is an exploitation workshop with case studies. It's at Keeldarry. I think Esther Gardner's doing that tomorrow at the Manxcare site. And also there's an adult exploitation drop-in to the Wellbeing Partnership at 2 o'clock through till 4 at Henry Bloom Noble Library tomorrow. On Wednesday. Nothing tomorrow. Those two are on Wednesday. And I think there's also one in the morning at the Tyrotian in Port Erin as well, adult exploitation. It's kind of a very general thing, but it does affect many people. And a lot of this is being done by criminals, bluntly, who want to exploit younger people. It has been mentioned many times before. There was a magistrate, I think, a couple of years ago was talking about the going rate for young people being coerced into taking bags of drugs from Upper Douglas to Lower Douglas, and what the going rate was for a carrier bag. I think it was about £150. Temptation is there for younger people, and obviously when people are young, maybe when you were young, you thought you could do anything. But when criminals are in charge of your life, then sometimes things really, really do change. I fully support the principle of assisted dying. We don't let animals suffer, and there's no hope when there's no hope of recovery. And despite what some people think, I believe humans are just another animal on the planet, says Ian, albeit the most intelligent species. As such, I believe that humans should have the same rights as other animals, not to suffer. If there's no hope for a human who therefore has to suffer because they can't be put out of their misery, says Ian. Eddie's with us now. Hello, Eddie.
Hi, Andy. All right, mate?
Very good, thanks. What a lovely day.
It's grand. It's been lovely for a while, actually. No wind, I keep hearing you say.
Well, can you imagine how much we would have been paying for electricity if we were buying it through an interconnector?
Exactly. Yeah.
I suppose they call this, you hear extreme wind and extreme rain and extreme. This is extreme calm.
Yeah, well, when I was on recently, I've been off. I've not been doing anything. I've been listening for a couple of weeks. But the last time I was on, I actually mentioned that I asked one of the questions at the meetings, which was, can you give me the figures for the wind from early this year, May? And they wouldn't give me any. But we kept our own figures up here, and there was only 6 days in the month of May where we would have got wind. But that was another thing. I heard you mention COP. One of my pet hates COP. It was a perfect subject for a recent Have I Got News for You? And they made a really good show out of it. Everything was a bit of a joke. The wrangle between Rishi Sunak and Boris, how you going? Oh, no, are you going? Who's going? Oh, no, I'm not going. This, that and the other. But the end of that show, excuse me, the end of that show, I think Ian Hislop pointed out that 82% of the countries all said, yes, we're going to do this, that and the other, did nothing. So it's a farce. Which gets me to the next point. I'll be as quick as I can because it's getting late.
Okay, you've got 30 seconds, quick.
Yeah, I listened to the vote of no confidence, and the one thing that struck me, I listened to the whole lot, was almost everybody admitted what a mess had been made, and, agree, even though they put the vote through. Well done, Tim. But the other thing I was going to say is, why can we not have a government who can say, we're in a perfect position to see we're the last in the queue for doing this wind turbines. The rest of the country is going away from them. The rest of the world is going away from them. So why are we actually going for them?
Okay, all right.
Ask yourself.
Appreciate it, Eddie. Thanks for wanting to get your call in before we went. Thanks for that. Good to hear from you. On the way, Donald Gelling will be on talking to David Callister. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today. That's it from Andy. Make the best of the rest of your Monday.
WINT. 60 years serving you as the nation's station. This is Manx Radio.
Former Chief Minister Donald Gelling had his heart set on a career in motor engineering when he left school. Indeed, he'd given notice that he was keen to do just that. But the best laid plans can gang awry, although sometimes it all works out in the end.
Having done my GCEs, I went with my father on the BSA 250 on the pillion. By this time we were mobilised and went down to Colston's and Cowley's to be told, we've decided we're not taking any more apprentice on. Mm-hmm. Well, I was absolutely shattered because as far as I was concerned, I was leaving school, going straight into work, and we were coming up the quayside, and my father obviously knew I was upset. And of course, we came round the quay, and he said to me, well, what about the Ford people here? Oh no, they were just cars and vans, and I really wanted, tractors and combines. And we might as well go and have a look in. And it was a real experience because we went in. You'll remember there were houses going along there.
Yeah, on the
big houses, actually on the bridge. Right along the bridge, all big houses, and then there was one next to the end before Lake Road where there was an archway going through. There were still rooms above it, but you went through and the old stables were down there, and of course that was where the garage was. But in one of the other houses there was like a showroom. The windows had been put in so you could see a car inside, and we went into the showroom. And this elderly gentleman was there with a trilby hat and, a coat, tie and all on, brushing up in the showroom. And, of course, my father went up and asked him to see was Mr. Christian about, Mr. Christian. So he said, I'll go and have a look. So he went off, went up these stairs, and about 5 minutes later, a young lady came down and said, are you the gentleman that's waiting to see Mr. Christian? So my father said yes, so half up the stairs we went, and I'll never forget it, walked into this room, and he was this fella sitting with a trilby hat and a coat on. It was actually Mr. Christian himself that had been down brushing up, but that was him. That was old EB, old EB as they would say. And he said to me, well, what have you done? What have you been? What do you want to do? And so on. And it was a Saturday, right? And he said, well, you be in here at 8 o'clock on Monday morning.
Part of Island life for 60 years. This is your Manx Radio.